Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mobbin coming back at you with another APUSH video. This is our second video focusing in on topic 1.3, causes of European exploration of the Americas. Last time we were here, we were talking about the various political and religious and economic motivations for European powers such as Portugal and England and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish to get into the Western Hemisphere exploration business, if you will. And notes that as these countries become powerful nation states, fueled by rivalry, this desire to explore is going to lead to even more, competition and controversy. Even amongst, allied countries like the Portuguese and the Spanish, at least with regards to the greater religious wars with the Protestants. And notes, some of these rivalries get pretty intense. I mean, the Spanish and the Portuguese are going to start to have some major problems in terms of, both of these countries are going to start to make claims on various parts of the world's global possessions, be it in Africa, the Western Hemisphere, etc. And when these two powerful nations cannot seem to work out a deal, you bring in the only person in the Catholic world that has enough, gravitas, if you will, to settle the dispute, and that's the Pope. And in 1492, the Treaty of Tortoises is going to see the Pope work out a deal between the Portuguese and the Spanish to settle any of these, disputed claims for territory in these new settlements. And as you take a look at this map right here, basically what the treaty is going to do is, in essence, divide the world, at least in terms of new possessions, if you will, into two halves. And one of those halves is going to be centered in Africa, and that is going to be, as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, the purview of the Portuguese. So in other words, the Portuguese are going to get first dibs on, African colonies. And that's why you're not really going to see hardly any Spanish colonies ever really set up in Africa. That's because of this treaty. But note where the Pope draws the line, one of those lines is going to kind of go right through South America, and east of that line is going to be also open to Portuguese control. And that area to the east here of South America is going to be eventually Portuguese Brazil. And understand the reason why Brazil, unlike the rest of South America, speaks Portuguese as opposed to Spanish, that's the Treaty of Tortoises. That's the power that's going to have. Now, note, the other half of unclaimed territorial possessions, as far as the treaty is concerned, is going to go to the Spanish. And if you look at the map and you draw that line, at least in the Western Hemisphere, or at least in the Atlantic, everything to the west of that line is now going to be considered, as far as the Pope is concerned, open to Spanish control. And that's going to be the rest of South America. It's really going to be the rest of the Western Hemisphere for the most part. And that, therefore, also explains why you don't see Portuguese developments in the Caribbean, in Central America, or even in our neck of the woods. So the Treaty of Tortoises, though it doesn't involve the English, is going to have a very powerful impact on the Western Hemisphere, if not the globe. So be mindful of that. Now, speaking of the English, who we're going to be drawing more of our European ancestry from as a nation than any other, understand that the English are going to be kind of getting into the exploration game later than countries like Spain and Portugal. A lot of it has to do with the fact that England does not have the money, it doesn't have the muscle, it does not have the military prowess to kind of keep up with Spain and Portugal and France, generally speaking, during this time period. We tend to think of England as a top dog nation. It isn't so much. It's a little bit second rate, relatively speaking, at this moment of time. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to be in the exploration business. They're just going to be slow to getting into it, and it's going to take a while for them to have some success. But early on, we will see some Spanish exploration in what is going to be, let's get to it here, in Newfoundland, right in through here. This is an island off the northeast coast of Canada. So we'll see a little bit of English exploration through there, but no real settlements. set up. That's going to take a little bit longer, and that's going to be, having to kind of fight out the Spanish for, because once again, going back to this map of the Treaty of Tordesillas, the Spanish basically believe that they have the right to control pretty much everything in the Western Hemisphere except for what's going to become Brazil. So the Spanish, and note the Spanish and the English had been rivals for a long time by this point. They are not going to be, wanting to see any kind of English success over here. So you're going to see a lot of attempts by the English to kind of try to get something going in the Western Hemisphere, stymied time and again by the Spanish. This is still before England is considered to be the king of the seas or anything like that. So understand, just England is kind of a second-rate power. Certainly behind the Spanish, and it's going to take them a while to have any kind of success. And even when they do start to have what they think is going to be a permanent settlement in what's going to eventually become North Carolina, that's also going to be coming along with some problems. If we take a look here on what is going to eventually be called the Outer Banks of North Carolina, you're going to see Roanoke Island. Now, Roanoke Island is going to be settled in 1585. And to once again give you a little bit of reference here, we're talking almost 100 years after Columbus's voyage to the Caribbean. So this is a long way up. Once again, the Spanish have a big lead on the English on exploration. But nonetheless, Roanoke Island, pictured right here, is going to be England's first attempt at a permanent colony in what's going to become America. The problem, though, is that they're going to be undersupplied. They're going to have difficult relations with the natives that are there. So this is not very fortuitous starting out in terms of a permanent colony. And the founder, in fact, is going to go back to England to try to get more supplies and more people to try to keep the colony going. He thought he would be gone for around 6 months or so before returning, but it doesn't work out that way. It actually takes a couple years before the English are able to try to get some folks down there to try to resupply the community. And by the time they get down there, the settlement has become abandoned. There's nobody there. It's gone. And the only sign of anything that could maybe give an inkling as to kind of where the community went was scrawled upon one of the trees there that says Croatoan. Now, Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, and so some will, surmise that this was kind of left as a, hey, we kind of moved over to a different island, but there was nobody on that island either. And so this failure at Roanoke will eventually be dubbed the Lost Colony, because we don't ultimately know what happened to this community of people. Now, granted, it was a very small number of people. I'm not talking about, hundreds and hundreds of people here. But still, though, we don't see any dead bodies. There's no, rotting, skeletons that they just kind of, are there. So it's not like they were massacred right there in the colony itself. Maybe they were driven away and killed somewhere else. Others have hypothesized that maybe they were captured by local natives and traded more into the interior of the Americas, maybe intermarrying with those native communities. We just don't know. We just do not, and that is one of the great mysteries of America, is what happened to the Roanoke colony. But note, though, that the failure at Roanoke is obviously not going to prevent the English from trying to give it a future go in terms of permanent colonies. And we'll talk obviously more about its first truly successful colony at Jamestown a little bit later. And to round it out for today, also be aware of the fact that it's not just the Portuguese, it's not just the Spanish, it's not just the English that are getting into the exploration game in the 1600s in North America. You've also got the French. And Jacques Cartier is going to have probably the most significant impact early on. We had mentioned earlier that the British are kind of doing a little bit of exploring around what is going to be called Newfoundland. They don't really set up anything there. Cartier is going to go beyond that and move into the interior of what's eventually going to become northeastern Canada, exploring the St. Lawrence River. And as a result of his efforts, we're going to eventually see the creation, of settlements such as Quebec and Montreal. But note that unlike the Spanish, and especially unlike the English later on, you are not going to see this big expansion of settlers coming to French colonial possessions in North America. It just isn't going to happen. Initially, it's just not really going to happen that much, relatively speaking, at all. At least in this earlier period, a big reason why it's not going to be happening is that France is going to be having a lot of domestic strife. If you are, the French nobility, you cannot give Western Hemisphere exploration the time and the attention and the resources necessary to be successful if you're trying to, fight religious wars within your own country. Basically, what you see happening in France is this long, extended civil war, for lack of a better phrase, between traditional Catholics and relatively recent converted Protestants known as the Huguenots. And so that internal strife is going to, take away from the ability of the French government to really place exploration as a priority. But once again, though, that's not to say the French are not going to have a role. They will, and we'll obviously talk more about their influence in the future. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. We'll see you there next time.